On June 10th, 2025, after more than 3 decades of appeals and legal battles, Anthony Floyd Wainwright was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. He was 54 years old. The crimes that brought him there were shocking, opportunistic, and devastating. This is the story of a young mother's life stolen, the long road to justice, and the pain carried by those left behind. But right before we dive in the case, leave a comment and let me know where you watch it from. Carmen Gabriella Gayheart was just 23 years old, a devoted wife, a mother of 2 young children, and a nursing student. She had only recently moved into what her family called their dream home. She was described by those who knew her as kind, gentle, and full of love for her children and even for animals. Anthony Wainwright, the man who would later end her life, was also 23 at the time. He had escaped from a North Carolina prison with another inmate, Richard Hamilton. Both were on the run, desperate for money, weapons, and a car that could carry them further away. The motive behind their actions was not a carefully planned vendetta. It was an act of opportunistic violence. They saw Carmen alone in the supermarket parking lot, and in that moment, she became a target. From a psychological perspective, Wainwright's choice reflected a mindset of control and dehumanization, seeing her not as a person, but as an obstacle and an opportunity. On April 27, 1994, Carmen Gayheart finished her nursing class and stopped at a Winn-Dixie supermarket in Lake City, Florida. It was broad daylight, just an ordinary afternoon. With her arms full of grocery bags, she was preparing to pick up her 5-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son from daycare. That was the moment Anthony Wainwright and Richard Hamilton struck. Recently escaped from a North Carolina prison, armed and desperate, they forced Carmen into her own blue Ford Bronco at gunpoint, in the middle of a busy parking lot. No one seemed to notice what had just happened. The 2 men drove her to a remote wooded area in Hamilton County. There, Carmen endured a terrifying assault before her life was ended. She was strangled and shot twice in the back of the head with a bolt-action rifle. For 5 long days, her loved ones waited in anguish until deputies finally found her body off a dirt road. She was still wearing a pink shirt, her favorite color, a heartbreaking reminder of who she was beyond the crime. Psychologically, the attack revealed more than cruelty. It showed a drive for total control, overpowering her, silencing her, and erasing her presence. In that moment, Carmen was no longer seen as a mother or a daughter, but as something to be used and discarded in their desperate escape. The day after Carmen's murder, law enforcement closed in on the 2 fugitives. Wainwright and Hamilton were spotted in Mississippi, more than 500 miles from the crime scene, still driving Carmen's blue Ford Bronco. When a state trooper attempted to stop them, the men opened fire. A gunfight followed. Both were wounded but survived, and officers finally brought their violent escape to an end. This was the critical turning point. From escaped prisoners on the run, Wainwright and Hamilton were now identified as the men who had abducted, assaulted, and killed a young mother of 2. The very car they had stolen from Carmen carried them directly into custody. The trial came swiftly in 1995. Each man tried to shift the blame onto the other, denying full responsibility for Carmen's death. But the jury saw through the contradictions. Both were convicted of murder, kidnapping, robbery, and rape. The jurors unanimously recommended the death penalty for Wainwright, and the judge sentenced both men to die in Florida's electric chair, adding 3 life terms each for their other crimes. From a psychological perspective, this stage revealed a clear pattern. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, Wainwright refused to accept accountability. Instead, he attempted to fragment the truth and distance himself from the consequences, an avoidance that would echo throughout his decades of appeals. On June 10th, 2025, after more than 30 years on death row, Anthony Floyd Wainwright was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison in Rayford. He was 54 years old. In his final hours, Wainwright declined the traditional last meal, saying it would distract him from focusing on the people he loved. At 6:10 p.m., the first chemicals entered his system. Witnesses saw his shoulders shudder, his eyes blink, and then his body grew still. By 6:22 p.m., he was officially pronounced dead. Before the execution, Wainwright spoke a final message. He declared his love for his wife Samantha, quoting from the film The Princess Bride. "Death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it for a while." He thanked those who supported him, criticized the Florida court system, and attacked his longtime attorney. He offered only one line to Carmen's family, saying he hoped his death would bring them peace, yet he never gave a direct apology. For some witnesses, his words were difficult to hear in the chamber, but the meaning was clear. Wainwright left this world still framing the story on his own terms. For Carmen's family, the execution marked the end of a long legal battle, but not the end of grief. Her sister, Maria David, sat front and center as Wainwright took his last breaths. She said she hoped he felt the same fear that Carmen endured in her final moments. To Maria, the execution by lethal injection was far too gentle compared to the horror her sister suffered. Carmen's mother-in-law, Gail Gayheart, called Wainwright a coward and said that after 31 years, justice had finally been served. Outside the prison, relatives wore shirts reading "Justice for Carmen Gayheart." They embraced one another, acknowledging that while the legal chapter was closed, the loss of Carmen would never be erased. The execution of Anthony Wainwright closed a legal chapter that lasted more than 3 decades. But for Carmen's family, justice did not mean healing. The loss of a daughter, a wife, and a mother can never be undone. This case is a stark reminder that every choice carries consequences. Wainwright's path from petty crime to escape to murder led not only to his own death, but to immeasurable suffering for others. Justice, even when delayed, brings finality, but it can never restore the years stolen from Carmen or the innocence taken from her children. Carmen Gayheart's life was stolen in a single day, while her killer lived 3 more decades before facing the ultimate consequence. What do you think? Does an execution bring true justice, or only an ending? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories that explore crime, justice, and the people forever changed by them, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next case. Thank you for watching.